The scent of pine after a fresh rain was supposed to be the smell of my new beginning. I am an illustrator for children's books, a man who spends his days with whimsical bears and thoughtful rabbits, a life lived in soft watercolors and gentle narratives. After my wife, Isabel, left for her longest deployment yet, the silence in our city apartment became a roaring void. I couldn't create. The whimsical bears looked sad. The thoughtful rabbits seemed anxious. So I bought the cabin. It was our shared dream, a secluded little house in a remote, gated mountain community called Blackwood Ridge, a place for us to reconnect with silence and with each other when she was finally home. The cabin was perfect, a sturdy, honest structure of wood and stone, nestled in a thick grove of pines. It felt safe, solid. I moved in at the beginning of summer, with nothing but my art supplies, my dog, and a deep, gnawing loneliness for Izzy. Her work was complicated. She was a logistics consultant for a private contractor that worked with the Department of Defense. That's what she told people. What I knew was that it took her to dangerous, dusty places for months at a time, and that when she came home, she sometimes had a haunted, faraway look in her eyes that no amount of my gentle humor could erase. She was strong, quiet, and moved with a grace that seemed almost predatory. I missed her with an ache that was a physical presence. My peaceful, creative solitude lasted exactly one day. The next morning, a pristine black SUV with tinted windows rolled up my gravel driveway. A woman in her late 50s, dressed in a severe but expensive-looking black pantsuit, stepped out. She was flanked by two large men in crisp, dark gray uniforms with Blackwood Ridge security embroidered on the chest. They looked less like security guards and more like nightclub bouncers. The woman's name was Meredith Blackwood. Her family had developed this entire community, a fact she made clear within the first 30 seconds. She was the HOA president, a title she wielded not like a manager, but like a feudal lord. "Mr. Carmichael," she began, her voice a low, imperious purr that did not match the coldness in her eyes. "Welcome to the Ridge. I am Meredith Blackwood. I am responsible for the safety and security of this community, a responsibility I take very, very seriously." She gestured to her two silent, imposing guards. "Our community has a unique security protocol. It is what our residents pay for. Your property, I'm afraid, is not yet in compliance." "Compliance?" I asked, confused. "I just moved in." "Precisely," she said, a thin smile playing on her lips. Bylaw 117 requires all residences to be equipped with the HOA-approved and monitored security system. It includes specific door and window sensors, a direct line to our central security office, and a mandatory monthly monitoring fee. My men will need to come in and install it. The idea of these two thugs installing a surveillance system in my home, a system that reported directly to her, was deeply unsettling. "I have my own security system." "Thank you." Meredith's smile tightened. "A non-compliant system is a security risk for the entire community. It creates a weak link in our perimeter. Compliance is not optional. My office will send you the paperwork with the fee schedule. I expect you to schedule your installation within the week." She didn't wait for an answer. She simply turned, her two guards falling into step behind her, and was gone. I stood on my porch, the peaceful silence of the forest now feeling charged and vaguely menacing. This was not a normal HOA. This was something else entirely, and its ruler had just informed me that my home was no longer my own. My first instinct was to call my wife. The call had to be routed through her satellite phone, the connection crackling with the static of distance. I told her about Meredith Blackwood, her private security force, and the demand to install their monitoring system in our home. I expected her to be angry. Instead, her voice was cold, calm, and analytical. "No, Sam, absolutely not. You do not let them install anything." "Do you understand?" "I understand," I said. "But they're talking about fines. Violations. Let them." She cut in, her voice sharp. "This is a probe. They're testing your compliance threshold. Get the names of the guards. Get their badge numbers if they have them. What's their command structure? Who's the lead? I want you to start a log. Every interaction, every letter, every threat, dates, times, individuals present. Create a pattern of life log on the primary actor. This Meredith woman. We need data." She was speaking a language I didn't fully understand. The jargon of her shadowy profession. Pattern of life log. Primary actor. It sounded like she was planning a military operation, not dealing with a power-tripping HOA president. I followed her instructions. I sent a polite, registered letter to the HOA board, stating my refusal to have their system installed, citing my right to privacy. I began a detailed log, documenting every time the Blackwood Ridge security SUV drove slowly past my cabin, the guards inside staring at my house. The official violation notices began to arrive, as Izzy had predicted. The first was a hefty $500 fine for failure to comply with community security protocol. I did not pay it. Then came the petty, harassing fines designed to wear me down. I received a $100 fine for unapproved landscaping because the wildflower garden I had planted to attract bees was not a manicured and orderly flower bed. I received a $75 fine for my truck being parked improperly in my own driveway, its front bumper allegedly 6 inches too close to the gravel path. I documented each one, scanned it, and sent it to a secure cloud folder that Izzy and I shared. Each time, I sent a formal, registered letter back to the HOA, contesting the fine and stating that I considered it to be an act of retaliatory harassment. I was building my paper trail, just as she had instructed. Meredith's response was to escalate. One night, around 2 a.m., I was woken by a blindingly bright light flooding my bedroom. I stumbled to the window and saw the Blackwood Ridge security SUV parked at the end of my driveway. Its roof-mounted spotlight aimed directly at my house. It stayed there for nearly an hour, bathing my home in a harsh, interrogating glare. I called the county sheriff's department to report the harassment. A deputy arrived, spoke to the guards, and then came to my door. "They say it's a routine security sweep," the deputy said, his tone suggesting he didn't believe it for a second. "Their company is licensed, and this is a private community. Technically, they're within their rights on the common roads. It's a gray area." The next morning, I went outside to find that the spotlights had scorched a patch of my wildflowers, and the small, meditative sand garden I had just finished creating had been trampled. The pristine white sand scarred with the heavy tread of combat boots. When I spoke to Izzy that night, her voice was different. The analytical calm was gone, replaced by a low, controlled fury that was more terrifying than any shouting could be. "They're using sleep deprivation and light disorientation," she said, her voice like ice. "Those are standard low-level coercive tactics. They are deliberately escalating from administrative to psychological pressure. This is unacceptable." She paused, and I could hear the faint, strange sound of what might have been a distant explosion on her end of the line. "Sam, listen to me. In the back of the hall closet, there's a large Pelican case. It's a go bag. Is the Iridium satellite phone in there charged and operational?" I think so," I stammered, a chill running down my spine. I knew the case she meant. It was heavy, and she had always been vague about its contents. "Check it," she commanded, "and check the perimeter sensors. The small, discrete ones I showed you how to set up along the tree line. Are they active and synced to the tablet?" "Yes." "Izzy." "Good," she said. "Do not engage with them. Do not confront them. Your mission is to observe, document, and report. To me, stay inside after dark. I am looking into some things on my end." After the call, I went to the closet. I opened the Pelican case. Inside, nestled in thick foam, was the military-grade satellite phone. A sophisticated first aid kit that looked like it could handle a gunshot wound, a GPS beacon, a set of night vision binoculars, and several other items I didn't recognize. This was not a standard emergency kit. This was the gear of a professional operating in a hostile environment. The whimsical children's book illustrator and his mysterious logistics consultant wife. For the first time, a genuine, cold fear began to settle in my heart. Who had I married, and what kind of fight was I in the middle of? Having established a perimeter of psychological pressure and minor property damage, Meredith Blackwood moved to her next objective: my complete social isolation. She used the official Blackwood Ridge online community portal and the monthly printed newsletter to paint me as a threat to the community's sacred sense of security. Her first move was a security bulletin posted on the portal's homepage. "Dear residents," it began, in a tone of grave concern, "it has come to the board's attention that an uncooperative resident is refusing to comply with our mandatory, community-wide security protocols. This individual has refused to install the monitored alarm system, creating a significant vulnerability in our collective safety net. A chain is only as strong as its weakest link, and this resident's selfish disregard for our rules puts all of us, and our families, at risk." She never used my name, but everyone knew who she was talking about. I was the weak link. I was the risk. The online comments were a predictable torrent of fear and anger, all stoked by her. "This is unacceptable. Why did they even let him move in? If he has nothing to hide, why won't he get the alarm? I have children. This makes me feel unsafe." Meredith then began a whispering campaign, spreading rumors at community gatherings and through her network of allies. The story she concocted was that I was a troubled recluse, possibly on the run from something, which was why I was so secretive and resistant to security. She suggested that I might be a writer who had made powerful enemies, or perhaps someone with a checkered past. The narrative was vague, but its purpose was clear: to make me an object of suspicion and fear. The strategy was brutally effective. The few neighbors who had offered a friendly wave in my first few days now averted their gazes, hurrying inside if I walked down the lane. The community, which had seemed at first to be a quiet mountain retreat, now felt like a hostile village where every resident was a potential informant for the lady of the manor. The isolation was crushing. My only real human contact was my nightly, crackling call with Izzy. I was her lifeline to a world of peace and normalcy. And now, my little piece of that world was becoming a war zone. One lonely afternoon, I was looking through an old photo album, trying to conjure the feeling of happier times. I came across a picture from a formal dinner we had attended in Washington, D.C. a few years ago. It was a military charity ball. I think I was in my best suit, looking slightly uncomfortable. Izzy was next to me, breathtaking in a simple black dress. But as I looked closer, I saw what I had never noticed before. While I was smiling awkwardly at the camera, her eyes were not. They were scanning the room, over the photographer's shoulder. Her posture wasn't relaxed. It was a state of coiled, balanced readiness. Her hand, resting on my arm, looked delicate, but her knuckles were slightly tensed. She was not a guest at a party. She was on watch. I flipped the page and found a small, grainy photo she had emailed me from her current deployment. It was her and her team. 6 of them, including her, in dusty, desert-style gear, standing in front of a battered-looking vehicle. They were all incredibly fit, their faces smudged with dirt and exhaustion, and their eyes. They had the same hard, unsmiling, 1,000-yard stare. They did not look like logistics consultants. They looked like warriors. My mind reeled. The jargon, the go bag, the intensity, the way she moved. A new, terrifying, and yet somehow clarifying picture was beginning to form. That night, Izzy called me. Her voice was tired. "How are things?" "Sam, the isolation campaign is in full effect," I reported, the military jargon now feeling strangely appropriate. "I'm officially the village pariah." "Good," she said, a word that surprised me. "Let them isolate you. It will make them overconfident." "Has there been any direct contact?" "No, not since the spotlight incident." "Stay vigilant," she said. "This Meredith character, she has the profile of a predator who enjoys the hunt. She will escalate again. I am working on a solution. Sam, it's in motion. Just hold the line a little longer." I hung up, a sense of profound dread mixed with a strange flicker of anticipation. A solution. In Izzy's world, I was beginning to realize, solutions were not polite letters or reasonable compromises. Solutions were decisive, overwhelming, and final. Meredith, having successfully isolated me and established her narrative, made a critical error in judgment. She assumed her authority within the gates of Blackwood Ridge was absolute, and she tried to extend it by weaponizing the legitimate, external authority of the county sheriff's department. She called them to report a suspicious and potentially dangerous individual who was refusing to cooperate with private community security officers. She was attempting to use real law enforcement to legitimize her thugs and to intimidate me with the threat of a real arrest. A single county sheriff's patrol car arrived at my cabin the next afternoon. A deputy, a young, professional-looking man with a calm demeanor, got out. Before he could even reach my porch, Meredith's black SUV pulled up behind him, and she and her 2 lead security officers got out, positioning themselves as if they were part of the official response. "Thank you for coming, Deputy," Meredith said, her tone oozing authority. "This is the resident I told you about. He is refusing to comply with our mandatory security protocols and has been acting in a very hostile manner." She gestured to her 2 goons. "My officers have been trying to reason with him, but he is being completely uncooperative." The deputy looked from Meredith's imperious face to her 2 oversized guards, then to me, standing quietly on my porch. He addressed me, not her. "Sir, is there a problem here?" "No problem on my end, Deputy," I said calmly. "This woman and her employees have been harassing me for weeks. Now they're trying to use you to do it for them." Meredith's face flushed with anger. "That is a lie. We are the authorized security for this private community. He is the one who is a threat." She turned to the deputy. "I want you to force him to comply with our rules." The deputy's calm expression hardened slightly. A look of profound annoyance crossed his face. "Ma'am," he said, his voice slow and deliberate, as if explaining a very simple concept. "I am a sworn officer of this county. I enforce state law and county ordinances. I do not enforce your HOA bylaws. That is a civil matter." He then turned his attention to her two guards, who were standing with their chests puffed out, trying to look intimidating. "And you two," he said, his voice now sharp and commanding. "Are you licensed and bonded security officers with the state? Let me see your credentials." The two men looked at each other, then at Meredith, suddenly looking much less confident. One of them mumbled something about their application being in process. The deputy's eyes narrowed. "So you're operating as unlicensed security. And what's this? I hear about you harassing this resident, shining spotlights into his home at night." Meredith tried to interrupt. That was a routine patrol. The deputy held up a hand, silencing her. "Ma'am, what you call a patrol sounds a lot like harassment. And what you're doing now sounds a lot like attempting to impersonate a peace officer by using my presence to enforce your civil rules. That is a crime." He turned back to her. "I am giving you and your employees a formal warning. You are to have no further contact with this resident. If I get another call out here, it will be you. Ma'am, who will be facing charges? Do I make myself clear?" Meredith was speechless. Her face was a mask of pure, sputtering rage. She had been publicly dressed down, her authority revealed as a sham in front of a real cop. Her attempt to use the system had backfired spectacularly. She herded her two chastened thugs back into her SUV and sped away without another word. When I told Izzy what had happened, her reaction was chillingly prescient. "She's been humiliated," Izzy said, her voice grim over the sat phone. "She tried to use the legitimate power structure, and it rejected her. That's dangerous. Sam, it means she no longer feels constrained by the law. She will fall back on her own resources, on brute force. The threat level has just escalated from harassment to potential physical violence." She was right. The failed attempt to use the real police had pushed Meredith into a corner, and a cornered animal is the most dangerous kind. The final escalation, when it came, was swift, brutal, and life-altering. Meredith, having been publicly humiliated and thwarted by the county sheriff, had been stewing in her own rage for a week. Her power had been challenged, her authority revealed as hollow. She needed to reassert her dominance in the most direct and undeniable way possible. She needed to break me. It happened on a gray, overcast afternoon. I was in my studio, sketching, when I saw her black SUV pull up my driveway, moving faster than usual. She wasn't alone. Her two lead thugs, the ones the deputy had dressed down, were with her. They got out of the car and marched towards my front door. This was not a visit. It was an invasion. I met them on the porch, my heart pounding in my chest. I discreetly activated the voice recorder on my phone. "Meredith," I said, my voice as steady as I could make it. "You were warned to stay off my property." "This is not a social call," she snarled, her face a mask of cold fury. "We are here to conduct a mandatory chimney and flue inspection, as per Bylaw 67. We have reason to believe your chimney is a fire hazard." It was the flimsiest of pretexts, a transparent excuse to force her way into my home. "You are not coming into my house without a warrant," I said, standing my ground in the doorway. "We don't need a warrant," she spat. "The bylaws give us the right of emergency inspection to protect the community. Now, are you going to step aside, or are my men going to have to move you?" I looked at the two men standing behind her. They were large, muscular, and their eyes were cold and empty. This was it. The moment of physical violence Izzy had warned me about. "You are not coming in," I said, my voice quiet but firm. Meredith gave a sharp, almost imperceptible nod to the man on her right. Everything happened in a blur. The man lunged forward, grabbing the front of my shirt and yanking me out onto the porch. The second man moved to block the doorway. I stumbled, and the first man, the one holding me, drew back his hand and slapped me hard across the face. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet afternoon. My head snapped back, stars exploding behind my eyes. "We are coming in. Mr. Carmichael," Meredith said, her voice a low, triumphant hiss as she stepped past me into my home. "You are going to learn that there are consequences for defiance." My training, the endless hours Izzy had made me practice basic self-defense, kicked in. I twisted, breaking the man's grip, and tried to shove him away. But he was too big, too strong. He pushed me back violently. I stumbled backward, my feet tangling with a small wooden bench on the porch. I fell, my left leg twisting awkwardly underneath me. A sickening, audible crack echoed in the mountain air, a sound of profound and irreversible damage. An explosion of white-hot, blinding pain shot up my leg. I screamed, a raw, guttural sound of agony. I looked down and saw my leg bent at an angle it was never meant to bend. Meredith and her men froze, their expressions shifting from aggression to a flicker of panic. They had not intended to injure me so severely, but the panic was quickly replaced by cold calculation in Meredith's eyes. She stood over me, looking down at my broken, twisted leg, at my face contorted in agony. "Well," she said, her voice dripping with ice, "it seems you had an unfortunate accident. You should be more careful." She turned to her men. "Our inspection is complete. Let's go." They got back in their SUV and drove away, leaving me lying broken and helpless on the porch of my own home, the silence of the forest descending once more, broken only by my own ragged, pain-filled gasps. I don't know how long I lay on the porch, drifting in and out of a fog of shock and agony. Eventually, my training, the emergency protocols Izzy had drilled into me, broke through the pain. I dragged myself, inch by excruciating inch, back into the house, leaving a trail of sweat and tears on the wooden planks. I reached the hall closet. I pulled out the Pelican case. With trembling, fumbling hands, I opened it and activated the Iridium satellite phone. It connected almost instantly, the sound of Izzy's voice a lifeline in an ocean of pain. "Sam, what's wrong?" I got the perimeter alert. I told her everything, my voice a choked, broken whisper, the confrontation, the slap, the fall, the sickening crack of my own bone. There was a long, terrifying silence on the other end of the line, the kind of absolute, profound silence that precedes a hurricane. When she finally spoke, her voice was a sound I had never heard before. It was devoid of all emotion, all warmth, all pity. It was the voice of a weapon being brought to a state of cold. Perfect readiness. "I'm coming home," she said. And the line went dead. The next 3 days were a blur of pain, fear, and waiting. A neighbor found me and called an ambulance. My leg was broken in 2 places, a spiral fracture of the tibia and a clean break of the fibula. I had surgery. A titanium rod was inserted into my leg, and I was sent home in a heavy, cumbersome cast, with a bottle of painkillers and instructions to stay off my feet. I felt fragile, helpless, and profoundly terrified. Meredith had won. She had broken me, physically and spiritually. On the 3rd night after the attack, it happened. Meredith, feeling untouchable and victorious, had scheduled a mandatory community security briefing at the Blackwood Ridge Clubhouse. She was going to use the unfortunate accident that had befallen me as a cautionary tale. an example of why her authority must never be questioned. I was in my cabin, my cast propped up on a pillow, watching the cars of my neighbors drive towards the clubhouse. The community was gathering for my official denouncement, and then I heard a new sound, a low, rhythmic thumping, growing steadily louder. It was the sound of a helicopter. A sleek, black, unmarked helicopter, with no lights, swooped low over the ridge, its blades beating the air with a menacing, powerful rhythm. It did not land at the clubhouse. It landed in the small clearing behind my cabin. The side door slid open, and my wife came home. Izzy was not alone. 3 other figures, all dressed in dark, practical civilian gear, emerged with her. They moved with a coiled, silent grace, their faces grim and focused. They were her team. They were not logistics consultants. They were predators. Izzy came into the cabin, her eyes taking in my cast, the bruises on my face. She knelt down and gently touched my cheek. Her eyes were filled with a cold, terrifying fire. "The meeting is at the clubhouse," she asked, her voice quiet. I nodded, my throat too dry to speak. "Stay here. Lock the door. We'll be back," she said. She and her team melted into the forest, moving towards the clubhouse with a silent, terrifying purpose. The community meeting was in full swing. Meredith Blackwood was at the podium, in her element. "The unfortunate incident involving Mr. Carmichael," she was saying, her voice filled with false sympathy, "is a stark reminder of why our security protocols are so important. When a resident resists, when they refuse to cooperate, accidents can happen. It is for his own safety, and for the safety of all of us, that we must have absolute compliance." At that moment, the main doors of the clubhouse burst open with a deafening crash. Izzy stood there, silhouetted against the dark night. Her 3 teammates fanned out, silent and menacing, covering the exits. The room, filled with over 100 residents, fell into a state of stunned, absolute silence. Meredith stared, her mouth agape. "Who are you? This is a private meeting, security." Her 2 thugs, the ones who had attacked me, stood up from their seats by the door. Izzy's eyes, as cold and flat as a frozen lake, locked onto Meredith. She didn't raise her voice. "My name is Isabel Carmichael," she said, her voice quiet, but carrying an authority that paralyzed the room. "You broke my husband's leg." Before Meredith could process the words, the room erupted in a blur of swift, brutal, professional violence. It was not a fight. It was a takedown. Izzy's 3 teammates moved with a speed that was almost inhuman. One of Meredith's thugs was neutralized by a single, silent blow to the throat that dropped him to his knees, gasping for air. The other was taken down by a devastatingly efficient joint lock that ended with his face planted on the floor, an arm twisted at an impossible angle behind his back. The entire thing took less than 5 seconds. Izzy never took her eyes off Meredith. She walked, with a slow, deliberate, terrifying grace, down the center aisle, directly towards the podium. The residents shrank back in their seats, their faces masks of terror and disbelief. Izzy reached the podium and looked down at the trembling Meredith. "You and your men illegally entered my home," she said, her voice still a low, chilling monotone. "You assaulted a civilian, my husband. You are running an illegal, unlicensed security operation. You are not an HOA president. You are a criminal." She reached behind her back and produced not a gun, but a set of heavy-duty zip ties. "And you are not going to be spared." With a swift, practiced motion, She pulled Meredith from behind the podium and secured her hands behind her back. "What? What are you doing?" Meredith shrieked, her voice a thin, pathetic wail. "You can't do this." Izzy ignored her. She pulled out her satellite phone and made a call. Her words were crisp, clear, and filled with a chilling finality. Spectre 1 to command. "We have 3 hostile actors detained. Site is secure. The package is ready for extraction. Requesting immediate handoff to federal authorities for prosecution under U.S. Code Title 18. Section 119. Conspiracy to commit assault against a military dependent." The entire room heard the words, military dependent, federal authorities. The truth, in all its terrifying glory, finally dawned on the residents of Blackwood Ridge. This was not an HOA dispute. This was something else entirely. And they, and their tin pot dictator, had just crossed a line they had not even known existed. The wail of distant sirens was the first sound to break the stunned silence in the clubhouse. It was not the local sheriff. A fleet of black SUVs with federal plates swept into the Blackwood Ridge community. Their efficiency and speed, a stark contrast to the sleepy pace of the mountain town. Uniformed federal agents secured the scene, their presence a shocking and overwhelming display of a power this community had never witnessed. Meredith Blackwood and her 2 thugs were taken into custody, not by the local deputy, but by federal marshals. The residents who had enabled and supported her watched in stunned, terrified silence as their leader was led away. Her reign of terror brought to a swift and brutal end. The subsequent investigation was a formal, federal affair. The evidence I had so meticulously collected, the letters, the financial records of the fines, the video of the spotlight harassment, and the damning audio of the final assault, was turned over to the U.S. Attorney's Office. Izzy's status as an active duty Tier 1 special operator, and my status as her dependent, elevated the crimes from a local assault case to a federal conspiracy. Meredith and her men were charged with a host of crimes that left them facing decades in federal prison. Their private security firm was exposed as a criminal enterprise, a tool of intimidation and extortion. Faced with the overwhelming evidence and the full, crushing weight of the federal justice system, they all took plea deals. Meredith lost everything: her wealth, her reputation, her freedom. She was sentenced to 10 years in a federal penitentiary. The Blackwood Ridge HOA was dissolved by a court order, its bylaws deemed predatory, and its leadership criminally negligent. The community was forced to reform under a new charter, one that guaranteed the rights of its residents and explicitly forbade the formation of any private security force. The reign of fear was over. Months later, my leg had healed, leaving only a faint scar and a slight ache on cold days. I was sitting on my porch, sketching in my notebook. The whimsical bears and thoughtful rabbits had finally returned to my imagination. Izzy was sitting beside me, her hand resting on my knee. She had taken a new assignment, a training position at a facility a few hours away. She was home to stay. The forest was quiet. The air was clean. The only security was the solid weight of my wife's hand and the knowledge that I was safe. The peace I had come to the mountains to find was finally real. A peace that had been shattered and then reclaimed by a force of nature I was proud and humbled to call my wife.